My name is Adam Semeka. I have been building in Bitcoin since about 2017. And so I've uh, started a few projects of my own. My most recent one is called Mana. It is a Bitcoin only self custodial Lightning wallet, basically, a payments platform. And so we focus on the wallet side, and we also spend a lot of focus on merchant adoption too. So that's what I've been up to lately. I spend a lot of time on X, aka Twitter, just posting and sometimes making people mad, sometimes making people happy. I just like to keep the conversation going. So um, yeah, that's me.
What's your favorite topic to make people mad?
Um, I have some pretty strong thoughts on the mechanisms of how we view Bitcoin as money. One of the specific ones, I don't know if we talked about it on our last podcast that we did together, but I feel very strongly that Gresham's law does not apply to Bitcoin, and that's a very popular subject among a lot of Bitcoiners for why they are hesitant to spend their Bitcoin, and they will cite Gresham's law. But I have gone, in my opinion, all the way down that rabbit hole and back, and I have concluded with many, many hundreds of hours of research and discussion, and I've come to the conclusion decisively that Gresham's law absolutely does not apply to Bitcoin, for at least for the reason for not spending Bitcoin, um, specifically to Gresham's law. So
Interesting.
that's yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just wanna for because I think most Bitcoiners are familiar with Gresham's law, but like give some the people an overview of like what this is for the few people that don't know about it.
Okay. Yeah. So the euphemism that is applied to Gresham's law goes like this: bad money drives out good money in the economy. And I say that's the euphemism because that is the simple way of explaining Gresham's law to somebody that doesn't understand it. Now, I will say that euphemism is not in itself Gresham's law. And I've said this before too. It's like saying everything that goes up must come down to explain gravity. And although that's mostly true, and that explains how gravity behaves in certain circumstances, um, there are things that go up that don't come down. Bitcoin being one of them over a long enough time horizon, right? So I just use that kind of tongue in cheek. But my point is, bad money doesn't have to drive out good money, depending on the qualifiers and the circumstances that are applied. When we're talking about historical monies, specifically physical coinage, Gresham's law is very applicable, and even that euphemism is very applicable as well, because we have historical precedent of what happens when governments or people that are controlling the currency, what happens when they dilute the physical content of the precious metals inside of the coins. And so that is what happens over time is the result of Gresham's law, which is bad money drives out the good money. And to put that, if anybody's completely unfamiliar with Gresham's law, this is the first time they're hearing of it, what that means is that people will hold on to the coins that have the higher value. And a recent example I gave was in the I think it was 1965, they removed the silver from the quarter in the United States. And so they replaced it with an inferior alloy. And so what people would do is they would, of course, hold on to the pure silver quarter because the silver content of that quarter was more valuable than 25 cents. And so the government essentially pegged the value of a quarter to 25 cents, but they could not control the value of silver. It was, free market pricing. And so over time, what people would do is they would spend the 25-cent quarter and they would hold the quarter that was worth more. And so when we say bad money drives out good money in the economy, that just means that the money that ends up in circulation is just a bunch of the bad money because everybody's holding on to their good money, which is the pure silver quarters.
Interesting. It's also like if Gresham's law of the best money drives out the bad money is true, then why do we have fiat right now?
So bad money drives out good money, meaning like people will have the propensity to spend the bad money. And so that's the argument that Bitcoiners make for not spending their Bitcoin is they say, well, Bitcoin's the good money, so I'm going to spend dollars because it's the bad money. And they use Gresham's law to almost as an excuse for why they're doing this. But the problem is Gresham's law itself, it's applied completely differently. It's because there's an opportunity cost difference. And my argument is that there's either negligible opportunity cost difference between spending fiat versus spending Bitcoin, or it's the other way around, in which it's actually more expensive to spend fiat than it is for Bitcoin, especially if you're living on a Bitcoin standard, because your purchasing power is getting eroded. There may be some advantages for swapping in and out of the different currencies for fees and stuff like that. But I'm not going to get too far into that. What I would say is my argument is at a minimum is that the opportunity cost for spending Bitcoin is not greater than spending fiat. But we can argue about the details on that. But my point is, people are saying that Gresham's law is why they're not spending Bitcoin. I disagree with that entirely. I think that there may be some other reasons why people are not wanting to spend Bitcoin. I argue those two. But my point is a common one is Gresham's law, and that one's an easy one, in my opinion, to discredit and disprove once you understand what Gresham's law is and how it works. So
I have a very simple argument why I do want to spend my Bitcoin. I mean, for me, it's kind of a no-brainer because I earn in Bitcoin around 70 to 80% of my income in Bitcoin, but I only am able to spend directly in Bitcoin around like 10 to 20% of my expenses. So naturally, I either have to borrow more and more against my Bitcoin or have to sell my Bitcoin that comes in. And when I sell my Bitcoin, I still have more Satoshis at the end of the month than the beginning of the month. I just sold some of the Bitcoin because I earn in Bitcoin. People get triggered by saying sell Bitcoin, but like I still save more Bitcoin than I had previously. I would argue even if you don't earn in Bitcoin, it does not matter if you spend in Bitcoin or in fiat. Let's say let's say you are a lunatic like me and you are 100% in Bitcoin. If you earn now fiat and convert it directly into Bitcoin, as you should be if you're 100% in Bitcoin, and then you have to spend some fiat, then you can sell Bitcoin and in that moment of sell. So you are maximum exposed to Bitcoin. Then the argument is, oh, but with Bitcoin, you have to pay capital gains tax. And I'm like, okay, capital gains tax, and what is it? It is on something that you made a capital gain on. So instead of holding fiat, you held Bitcoin. And because you held Bitcoin, you made a plus. And on that plus, you get capital gains tax. So yes, you have to give more taxes, but you made a plus. If you don't make a plus whilst other than holding the fiat, you don't have to pay taxes on that. So overall, it's a better decision to have the Bitcoin because if you make a loss, you don't have to pay taxes. If you make a plus, you have more than if you would have held the fiat. So my argument is the longer and the bigger and the better the exposure to Bitcoin is, outside of going into debt. I just don't like it ethically, but you can do it's probably a good financial decision. It's the best way to have exposure to Bitcoin. The more exposure you have, if that makes sense.
it does, and I agree. There aren't a lot of people, just percentage wise, that agree with that. And I think that number is growing. I think the number of people that are getting on board with this idea is going up. And what I'm seeing as a potential reason for that is, I don't think, if I could just make an assumption here, you probably weren't on that mindset a few years ago. Even though you knew about Bitcoin, you probably had Bitcoin, you probably hadn't convinced yourself yet. And I think the biggest factor of that is time and watching your dollars go down and your Bitcoin go up. And eventually, in our minds, we realize what's happening, and that the more exposure we have to fiat, the more that's lowering our value, and the more exposure we have to Bitcoin, the more is raising our value. And again, just I think it's just a matter of time, because the people that I see converting that weren't necessarily convinced before. I mean, some people get it right away, but the majority of people that I see that are kind of switching their mindset and switching their finances around to be more of on a Bitcoin standard are typically the people that have been in here a while, and so they're you know they're watching the value of their net worth go up significantly more and more and more and more just because of their exposure to Bitcoin. Why would you not? Because you'd have to convince yourself that Bitcoin was going to go down over time if that wasn't the case. And so if your assumption is that Bitcoin's going to continue to go up forever, uh, it's hard to make a case to hold on to any amount of fiat. Now, I don't go out and say that like you shouldn't spend fiat if you have it. Like I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I do advocate for people to spend more Bitcoin when they can. And one, it's a personal thing, in the sense that you're able to gain maximum exposure to Bitcoin in this regard, and I think it will help you. Again, assuming that the Bitcoin price in relation to dollars goes up. We're just going to assume that's the case for my arguments here. But on a personal level, your net worth is going to go up. The amount of value that you have, your purchasing power is going to go up if you're holding more of an exposure on the Bitcoin side. But it's so much more than that, right? That is, in my opinion, that is just a small benefit, right? Because maybe you're a Bitcoiner, you have your stack, but you also have this little stack on the side of fiat that you want to keep out of Bitcoin. I don't think is necessarily logical, but maybe you're like, oh, I can't buy Bitcoin with this because of Gresham's law. Gresham's law says I can't do it, and so I'm going to listen to what somebody said on a podcast sometime because this is what makes sense to me. Anyway, I think that's a logical fallacy. But my point is, that's just one aspect of the benefits of uh, converting to Bitcoin. The other benefits are, I think, more impactful, and that is the benefits of the economy as a whole. Because the more we go out and we find people that take Bitcoin as payment, we find Bitcoiners to do business with. The first thing is I think the quality of the products and the services that we get is going to go up. The quality of the people that we deal with, I think, have a higher level of integrity. Generally, in my experience, there's much more of a focus on the quality of the product and services that they give you, just because of their mindset of having a better, more sound, harder money. And it kind of ties into a lot of aspects of our lives. I don't think it's necessarily a coincidence that when you run into Bitcoiners, they tend to be fairly obsessive with, health and, healthy practices, whether it's, whether how they're eating, maybe potentially, exercising more, people turning their lives around for the better, just because they figured out that, that now they can preserve their wealth further into the future. And so they become, typically they become less, they lower their time preference, and they're discounting the future much less, because now that they're a Bitcoiner, now they have Bitcoin, they don't have to worry about fighting this constant uphill battle of maintaining purchasing power into the future. And so you're growing the economy because you're dealing with, in my opinion, higher quality people, because you have a higher quality money, but you're also encouraging the build out of the infrastructure that's required for Bitcoin to proliferate. No matter who you are, no matter where you are in this argument, I think that everybody, or at least the vast majority of people, would agree that at some point we have to transition to using Bitcoin as a currency. Even the people on the other side of the camp that are like, "Oh no, Bitcoin is a capital asset for store of value, and you should not spend Bitcoin." I think that even the majority of that camp would agree that at some point, hyper Bitcoinization, as some people would put it, comes at someday when we're spending Bitcoin. I don't see why that can't be now. And I think that on an individual level, it absolutely can be. I think we can adopt Bitcoin individually and start spending Bitcoin right now. So I think spending Bitcoin, it promotes the proliferation of that infrastructure development. It's going to encourage businesses to accept Bitcoin. You take a look at some of the big ones like Steak and Shake, a massive food chain, fast food chain in the United States. Now they're taking Bitcoin as payment at their restaurants. I've had it many times. I'm going to continue to give them my business because they're taking a better form of money. I recently made a post on X that I joined a premium subscription for a company called Angel Studios. They're kind of like a competitor to Netflix or Hulu or Amazon or whatever, but they make their own movies and TV shows. And they just recently announced that they're using a Bitcoin Treasury standard. So they already have purchased Bitcoin for the Treasury, and they're going to continue to add to that. And so I want to give my money to Bitcoiners. It's kind of like the same reason why people want to buy things from their local community. They want, if you're in the United States, a lot of people want to buy things that are made in the United States. If you're in your country, you want to buy things that are made in your country and grow the economy locally. And I think it's a very similar mindset. I want to give my money and my value to the people that are going to use it for the things that I think are important. And so whether that's Bitcoin or maybe some other aspect of my life, there are certain types of people with certain values that I want to promote and give my money to, rather than giving my money to organizations and companies that I think are more detrimental to what my values are.
It's so interesting. I love this argument also of growing the ecosystem. And maybe I can tell you the reason why the simple, honest reason why I didn't do it earlier. It was just because I was lazy and I didn't want to change my behavior. So even I had the podcast, and I have I've told that story, I think 2-3 times on the podcast. I didn't accept Bitcoin payments till the Bitcoin Way reached out to me, and they kind of want to partner up with me on the podcast. And they're like, hey, like, why are you not accepting Bitcoin payments? And Tony kind of called me out on that. I was like, yeah, I really should do that. And the Bitcoin Way kind of opened that for me. I was like, okay, like I will I will accept Bitcoin payments now. I didn't want to deal with, oh, what do I have to do for bookkeeping? What do I have to do with like business wise? It turns out it's super easier than fiat. Honestly, it's like I don't even know how to accept fiat payments from across. I probably need like PayPal or Wise or anything like that, and they take a hefty fee, way more than Bitcoin on-chain transaction fee currently. So the simple reason was like I didn't want to change my behavior. I was lazy on the receiving side, and once I got the receiving side, I was like, oh, like, shit, I get Bitcoin. But I have fiat bills. Like, how do I do that? And there's like, yeah, like there's Bring In, and I just like I can revert that. And there's like Bitcoin. There are many other providers that just like you give them Bitcoin, they send you they send you the euros. You can even send directly to someone else's bank account instantly, and you don't even see the euros. Like there are great services out there where you can actually live on a Bitcoin standard and sell at the very moment, or a Bitcoin credit card or Bitrefill. Like the more I think about it, the more providers are there. And so it's just about, I think, changing the behavior. And it's the easy way to just like, you get your fiat payment, whatever you want to save in Bitcoin, you put it on exchange, then you put it on exchange, convert it to Bitcoin, get it in your self-custody setup. I mean, if you have that setup, you're already better than like most people. Like you are like the top 1%. If you have self-custody, if you save most of your money in Bitcoin, it's like literally you're already like a top Bitcoiner. But the next step is like spending that and really kind of operating on a Bitcoin standard. And I had some guests on that did that. There are many different ways you can do it. Either find many places where you can pay with Bitcoin, but you also have to there are fiat things that you have to just pay that are just in fiat, and you cannot convert them to Bitcoin. So you can have a credit card that you pay off at the end of the month. So like, there are many different strategies to do that. And I just want to convert as much to Bitcoin. I want to live as close to a Bitcoin standard as possible. And it does take some getting off your butt and changing some behaviors. And I think that's the simple reason why I didn't do it. And I think we would be astonished how many people have that laziness and changing of behavior as a reason, and just taking like, oh, Gresham's law as a kind of an excuse of like, oh, like I want to spend fiat first and not Bitcoin. No, it doesn't make, like, if you want to spend fiat, like, then you have to hold fiat. Do you really want to hold fiat? Like, why the heck do you want to hold fiat?
I agree. And just to round back in case anybody misses, the reason why Gresham's law doesn't make sense is because if we take the example of when Gresham's law does apply, let's just look at the US quarters. We have one silver quarter and one, junk metal quarter. And you want to go buy something for 25 cents, you can go and you can buy it for 25 cents, or you can take your solid quarter, which I think is like $4 worth of silver now. So the question is, do you want to pay 25 cents for your product, or do you want to pay $4 worth of your product? That's the opportunity cost difference. Now with Bitcoin, there is no opportunity cost difference. If you want to pay 25 cents, you can pay 25 cents with US dollars, or you can pay 25 cents with Bitcoin, because it's completely fungible and divisible. So you don't have that divisibility issue, where you can't physically take 25 cents out of your $4 solid silver quarter unless you're clipping it or smelting it down and recasting it or something like that. But that's very impractical.
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.